Gold nuggets. Get them, write them, print them, hang them, enjoy them. The love of money is the root of evil. Nope. The misuse of the ability to make money is the root of all evil. God gave you the ability to make money. Don't abuse it or misuse it by gambling, taking advantage of others, hoarding, or stealing. Stop bribing God. If you fix this, God, I'll go to church. Expect God's blessing if you follow the footprints. Remember the poem Footprints? For those who don't, the 2 footprints are where I carried you through your troubles. The essence of sin is the rebellion against divine authority. For people to say that's just the rebellious spirit in the child, this should not be allowed to grow, fester, or live. Anytime you see the word therefore in the Bible, slow way down and truly read what it is. Well, therefore. Dathan and Abiram, remember them? Troublemakers. And Korah, a Korathite, a priestly tribe leader, talked with Moses in front of everyone to try to embarrass Moses. If the earth swallows them, I am the leader. This was all based on jealousy, and they lost. They were posers, not what they talked. True leadership is not visible, but their results are visible. A lot of mixed multitude people went away at the Korah incident. I spoke of the mixed multitudes earlier. The Abrahamic covenant for the land of Canaan is the promised land. It is an unconditional covenant. Nobody can cancel this covenant but God. And God won't do it no matter how much they mess up. The Mosaic covenant is the 10 Commandments and all the good and bad that comes from them. This is a conditional covenant. Do good or get out. God has kicked them out into Assyria and Babylon. When they get better, they return. Regathering. While they were together, place to place in tents, in the cross formation, they were pretty tight, and gathering wasn't an issue. Now they crossed the Jordan and spread out in their new locations in the new land. Now they need regathering, so they had festivals. They would all go to Jerusalem, where the temple would be built. The festivals of Passover, gathering shouldn't be just for Passover festivals, but for us. The gathering with Christians to worship and have the Bible taught. Advances in communications have shut us down. Likely standing next to each other and texting each other. A friendless man has a left hand bereft of a right hand. Proverbs 18 says you need others. We need family. Don't build a fancy meeting place. Instead, have a good meal. Sup with each other. Regather. 23 times in the Old Testament, there was a command to rejoice. Joy is a choice. Time is lost when you don't have joy in your heart. The book of Philippians, written by Paul when he was in jail, was about rejoicing. Paul was like the Energizer Bunny. He was always rejoicing after being beaten multiple times. Pentecost and Tabernacle, redemption, rejoicing. It isn't always true that the person behind the pulpit are actually of God. False prophets use the same vocabulary, but not necessarily meaning it, because they are playing it too safe. You shall walk after and serve God with your best. Tolerance is not a virtue. If you are enticed by a relative to follow other gods, ignore him. 1 John 4. Believe not every spirit. Test them. If the person comes to you and asks for money, they are a false prophet. God taking care of his own, and finances should not be in their mind. Test their character and creed. Ask their definition of what they think Christ is about. Galatians 1 speaks of people that stray the Bible. If you listen to them, are you becoming more legalistic, more accepting, or more loose? Disfiguring the body to show your love for God. This is a pagan ritual because their gods required it. Don't. They even go into dietary conditions. God never said it. When it comes to not eating meat, not drained of blood, there's a reason. The kosher laws were because of disease that now don't exist because of the FDA. Animals that chew the cud and have cloven hook can be eaten, but must have both. If not, don't touch it. Several types of birds are not to be touched. Any creeping thing shall not be eaten. Straining the blood from a gnat, but eating a camel. This is what it boiled down to. Pushing real hard on unnecessary laws and not applying to the other laws at all. The tithe is the only area that God says you are allowed to test him. Look what happens when you disobey or test the Lord in sacrifice or learning or teaching. He says, don't go there. Yet, in tithing, he says, go ahead, make my day. The year of release. Every 7th year the land is laid fallow. Mortgages are released. 7 sets of 7, the year of Jubilee. Return everything to its original owner. Do you see the theme of sevens? There are several sevens throughout the Bible. 7 is the number of completion. Whether correct or not, at least complete. This applies to everywhere, except where there are poor people. It was so important to God that God kicked Israel out of the land for 490 years, 70 times 7. The Babylonians came in and took over the land, 2 Chronicles. The Jewish people are the richest people in the world. 2% of Americans are Jews, and of those, 20% of those are the richest people in America. Is it possible God can eradicate poverty from the land? Not when man has his own way. An earmarked person to put an awl through their ear. Slavery at the time was rampant, so it wasn't being used as a witness. It was being used as a witness. Being the best slave you can be. When you become a Christian, they use slave language. Yet, Jesus said, you are not a slave. You shall be called my friend. We are poor in spirit. To turn to Christ as a bondservant is the best way you can do. Sheer loyalty. The firstborn of anything you get shall be dedicated to God. If there is a defect in what you give, don't give it. The feast that Jews celebrate are centered around agriculture. The Passover. The 50th day after Jesus died, there was a Passover. A sacrifice that costs nothing is worth nothing. It has to be something that you're going to feel when you do it. Malachi speaks of the detestable sacrifices that were being given at the time. They were given defects at sacrifices. Now comes the time of kings in the Bible. The people decided they want a king, someone earthly that they can actually see. God had to start setting rules for what a king should and shouldn't do to be a good earthly king. Ironic enough, those Israelites, again, opted to do things differently. God did what he could to help them get a good king, but even the kings selected had their own versions of how to do things, and things were not good. Solomon collected silver and gold to a point that the value of gold was a dollar bill. One of God's requirements to be a king was for the king to write down the Pentateuch from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Deuteronomy, so he would have a copy. The Lord wanted the people to know the difference between soothsayers and actual prophets. Today, there are 1.5 million registered witches in the U.S., thanks to millennials not wanting to believe in the God of their parents. This is from Newsweek 11/18/2018. When a man approaches you and says, "I have a word from God," shall be careful about it. When a prophet, 18:20, speaks of God, it doesn't happen. He shall be stoned. The area deals with cities of refuge where the people went if they killed someone by accident. If you are awaiting a trial, this is where you go. This was their jail. Premeditated murder people are taken out of the city and killed. Nowadays, if you just hate someone in your heart, much the same shall happen. This also referred to as premeditated because you wanted to do it. This is why you are mad at someone. It is best advised as you clear it up the issue as soon as possible, lest God decides to apply this to you. If a false singular witness shall accuse, then if you don't come up with at least one more witness, or the crime spoken of by the witness is thrown out of court, if you gave false witness testimony, the false witness will suffer the same punishment. Those that remain shall learn the fear of such. Lux talionis makes overdoing the punishment stop. In other words, knocking out a tooth doesn't mean the other person gets dentures. These cities were Levitical cities because the Levites were scattered by God for the mass murder they committed. Ironically, the Levites would have been put to death, but God needed the Levites in the future. It is because of their joining Moses at the calf incident that repaired their future. Deuteronomy is one big counseling session by Moses on how to handle life. The ones he is talking to have no personal experience about how they got to where they are. Deuteronomy will be referred to so much so through the Bible that Jesus quotes it more than any other book of the Bible. Moses is fixing to give it up. 11 days journey to the promised land from Egypt to Canaan, and God made them take 40 years. Nineveh alone would have been 3 days journey to go around. Caleb and Joshua would be the only ones of 1,200,000 people, or 7 funerals an hour, to get rid of the previous generation. After the massive review in Deuteronomy, this is what God wants from Israel now. Do not add to or take away from the word which I have given you. You don't get the decision of, I don't like that part of the book. In Jewish ways of counting, a head, or one doesn't mean one, it means unity. A head also means 3 in 1. Anything that can have a group count of 1. To teach that time means to repeat or recap. Proverbs, train up a child, actually means to stimulate, as in the taste buds or desires. God has delivered you, so love or activate. to have the fear of the Lord, or the desire to react in a heavenly action. Duty towards God and duty towards man should become one. Love your God and your neighbor as yourself. God, in this book several times, said, "You shall remember," because that is what he wanted them to do. Remember. Institutions that are great decay over time. Harvard University has done that. Memory can be a dreadful or even delightful thing. Remembering can make your future that much better. The sins of omission and commission, doing and not doing for others, or taking out the time to do something. Cross-dressing, yes, cross-dressing is paganistic. Not a sparrow touched the ground without God knowing about it. There are other laws that I will list later. About divorce. Divorce has a reality so big that to date it is up 700%. Why did Moses command a woman to get a divorce? Jesus said, "Whoever divorces shall commit adultery." Deuteronomy 24. Also Matthew 19. If he finds he doesn't like her and she marries another and her second divorces him, she can't remarry him. Sexuality, immorality begats death. She becomes defiled by him divorcing her for an unbiblical reason. Matthew 5, the two shall become one. Ezekiel 18. Don't muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. They work in it. Let them eat some of it. This should apply to today. A cook be allowed to, snack. Lever means husband's brother. Levirate marriage is one that the brother marries the wife. Goel is husband's brother. The covenants of God celebration 3 major festivals. Feast of Passover, or first fruits before you are allowed to be a consumer of the product. I consecrate it. There were things you had to say during this consecration. The priest will take the basket, put it down, and you say no more. Evangelistic or evangelastic? Is it plastic or is it real? Testimonies that grow as they are growing, doing their bragamony instead of testimony. This is the first time Moses brings up tithing. Tithing answers a deep question, not of what you own, but who owns you. Are you a self-made ruler or ruler of anything? Or God redeemed you? Is God last on your budget? Tithing is one of the healthiest disciplines as a believer. Tithing is not just money. It is also food. Do you tithe because you get to, as you purpose in your heart? Back then, there were 3 tithes: produce, festival, and food, and tithe for the poor. Tithing, the New Testament tithe, was actually unlimited. As you purpose in your heart, so shall you give. Malachi 3 says, "Test me," to open up the windows of heaven. You cannot outgive God. Feast of Pentecost. Feast of the Tabernacle, rejoicing, confirmation, to say a verbal oath. Conclusion: the 10 Commandments are to be written on the stones, whitewashed with limestone, so it can be seen, and to place on the mount in the middle of town. The Code of Hammurabi is the Code of Moses, a diorite, 232 paragraphs. This is an idea of what they wrote on those stones. Tribes to bless are from the wife of Jacob and Rachel. On the other mount were the offerings of the other wives of Jacob. The law. The verse makes the beeline to the cross. Preach the gospel. Preach the law. The law is the needle that takes the thread of the gospel into your heart. Unless you know you are a sinner, you won't bring an offering. Review in 1, 2, and 3 regulations. Readiness for the future. God's blessings will chase you down. The blessings or the blastings. The list of blastings is 4 times longer. God knows Israel's going to mess up. You have to remember, not only will his blessings chase you down, but so will his cursings. His cursings will be plagues, like the plagues of Egypt. You thought speaking of bestiality was bad? Going into what is written here is, let me put it like this. It happened or it wouldn't have been documented. For you know from experience, the Bible has the good and the bad written so that you would not be covered by honey. In other words, way too thick. Try to live without God is much like living without the law of gravity. You don't have to believe in it. It will curse you with death by bringing you to the ground. The third speech from Moses. Horeb is the mountain range that Mount Sinai is on. They were at Kadesh Barnea for 2 years after arriving in Sinai. Some of the survivors were actually there in the beginning to have seen the actual events Moses is talking about, just too young to talk about it at the time. People back then, and even today, talk about the Lord instead of their Lord. Sihon stole the land from the Amorites. The word, therefore, see what it's there for. If you want God's blessings, see what it is there for. Dedicate to the one who is already dedicated to you. The drunkard could be included with the sober. In other words, those who just don't care or are included with those who do. Those who would do something just because. Nobody tells me what I can do. I will do it just because they told me no. Brimstone is salt. Salt on the land. The Lord knows our limits and gives us everything on a need-to-know basis. You won't be able to take it all in until you put on the new you in heaven. Paul said, "Behold, I show you a mystery." It is a mystery until God knows you'll be able to understand it. Be a Klingon. God will love it. Cling to God. Joshua was selected as leader because he was a man of faith and a faithful man. He was true to Moses and God. It was believed that Moses didn't write the Pentateuch because writing hadn't been invented yet. But according to archaeologists, they found otherwise. Historical and prophetical. May my message refresh and stimulate your life. Find an enemy. Buy them a gift. Confuse them. Moses finished out his song. Trust in God completely and do what you want. This is said correctly because in your heart and life are aimed at God. You don't want to do wrong. So yes, do what you want. Moses then goes through a description of the future of the sons of Jacob, from Reuben to Benjamin. In Jude, Archangel Michael disputed Satan as to where the body of Moses actually was buried. Not that Michael didn't know, but that Satan didn't know. The best way to end the Pentateuch is with the blessings that generations gave to each other for finishing the book. Be strong, be strong. Encourage one another. We did it.